What up, nerds? My name is Leslie Smith. Welcome to the Nerdy Narrative, where today I'm going to have an exciting new installation in my author series, Why My Story Matters. Today's featured title is Ledge, the first book in the Glacian Trilogy by Stacey McEwan. For those of you who are not familiar with Stacey McEwan, let me introduce you. Stacey leads a double life. By day, she's a school teacher, but by night, she's a fantasy writer. Some of you might be thinking, Stacey McEwan, that name sounds familiar. Where do I know it from? Well, she is a big book influencer on lots of different social media outlets. The biggest one, the one where I found her, was TikTok. She has this series called Turning Her Husband into a Fictional Character, and it is hilarious. I will include all of her links down below if you want to go check her out if you're not already following her. In fact, it's due to Stacey's huge following on her social media outlets. All of these book lovers were begging to hear about her ideas and stories that evolved into Stacey writing her debut novel, Ledge. Ledge is the beginning of a new epic fantasy series that has a very strong subplot that centers around romance. The title of the book comes from a place called the Ledge. There are people that live on this ledge. It's trapped between a mountain and this deep chasm, meaning the people on the ledge cannot get off the ledge. And this is how we meet one of our main characters, Dawson. Dawson is a resident of the ledge. She is the last remaining member of her family. The rest have all either fallen into the chasm to their deaths or they were chosen in a previous culling. The ledge is all Dawson has ever known. She heard that there was another world out there from her grandmother, but she never saw it with her own eyes. The season changes, a selection day arrives, and Dawson is chosen and carried away to what she feels is her certain death by the Glacians. Dawson makes a horrendous discovery that this is not always the case, but possibly the best case scenario when it does happen. Interesting stuff and things happen. I won't tell you what they are, but Dawson ends up escaping from the Glacians with the help of a half-Glacian named Ryan. So if you're keeping up, you've put two and two together. Ryan is our other main character, and we have our enemies to lovers trope set up and ready to go at this point. I will tell you this, the romance is just a subplot. There's a whole other side of the story where now that Dawson has escaped the ledge and she realizes there is a whole world out there where people are living and thriving, naturally this strong female protagonist wants to go and save her people on the ledge, and in order to do that, she's going to need the help of those that took them there in the first place. I absolutely love this story. What Stacey McEwan did by writing these strong characters full of snark and sass who were just themselves with each other, it was so refreshing. So without further ado, let's bring on Stacey McEwan and find out what it is about Ledge that mattered most to her. Hi Stacey, welcome to the channel. I'm so glad you were able to stop by today and ask the one question I know authors don't like answering sometimes. And that question today is going to be in reference to your debut novel, Ledge, which is the first book in the Glacian Trilogy. And what I would love to know is, what was it about this story? What inspired you to write this story? Was it a particular character that popped into your head? Was it an event? Something that inspired you to where you crafted this story?
I actually love answering this question, so we're off to a good start. Okay, so I didn't know it was going to be a fantasy, but the image that I had in my head, and that sounds so corny saying that I had a vision and image in my head, but I did. I had an image in my head of this really like fierce woman who was, covered in furs and things, but she was standing in this frozen wasteland and she was strong enough to survive it. And so that was just like the little brick that I had that I started building with. But I am also very attached to stories about characters who survive in some kind of like really hostile wilderness. Like I get really drawn into, the story about the man in the middle of the desert wandering and hoping to find an oasis, or, the boat that's bobbing on the sea, hoping that they one day find shore. And I'm very interested in the way humans react or behave in those situations, and like the very desperate measures that they go to try and survive or escape rather. And I wondered if I could flip that on its head. So instead of writing a story about this woman who had to escape this frozen wasteland, what if the objective was an escape? What if she couldn't escape? What if she was trapped? And what would the next goal be? If a human's goal in that situation is not escape, then I'd have to assume that the next goal would be trying to find some kind of contentedness and trying to make a life in that really hostile environment. So that's sort of how the story started. And then so slowly it built. I started to wonder, what could I do to trap her in a frozen wasteland like that, in this,
Why are
eternally
you so mean?
wintry thing? So it's really fun. It's kind of like playing Sims and just building this little world. And I thought, well, I'll make a mountain shelf and she has to stay up there, and I'll make it unclimbable on one side and I'll put a great big chasm on the other side that she can't cross. And so slowly I just started to construct these elements that made sense. And it was brick by brick, and eventually other creatures and things. And it turned into a fantasy because I had to create those elements to trap her there. And I find that all my stories do that anyway. I always start out with something that's rather realistic, and it turns into something that is not at all realistic. So yeah, that's how Ledge was sort of born.
That is so interesting. And I can understand what you're saying about the image. I think in pictures myself.
Me too.
And I loved that when I read this story, I said in my written review, you did such an amazing job building that ledge in my mind. Anytime any of the characters were near or talking about or thinking about that chasm, I mean, thinking about it now, I have chill bumps on my arms because the danger felt so real. And just the not knowing about this ledge, just the fear, the danger, the constant kept me on my edge. But then on the opposite side of that, off of the ledge, like, even though we didn't get, there wasn't a ton of like grand scale world building, where we went was just so well described that I felt I was standing there watching this happen. I was just a third party watching this happen in front of my eyes. So you did an amazing job for someone who is able to read and visualize what they're reading. So that was fantastic.
Perfect. Well, those are my favorite stories. Like, the more immersive they are, the more engaging they are, the more likely you are to keep reading. And any book that can do that for me wins me over. I'm a very easy sell in that manner. And I think the whole time I kept thinking, if it's this like cold, horribly hostile place, then I want the readers to kind of feel that as well. I want them to feel that sense of constant danger, and not even in the fact that characters are hostile, but in that they could literally die overnight just from pure exposure or what have you.
There was danger everywhere, and you just never knew where it was going to come from. I was fearful, but I was eating it up at the same time, and it was so good.
Thank you. That's so complimentary. It means a lot.
Well, so another thing I always ask when I bring y'all on is there any section of the book, non-spoiler if possible, or a quote that is the heart of the story to you?
So my favorite quote from the book and my favorite part of the book are kind of separate, so that makes that question kind of awkward. But my favorite quote of the book comes from Ryan, and he's the love interest in the story. And without spoiling it, he's talking to a third party about our main character, Dawson, who's this terribly fierce, like unapologetic, merciless woman. And he's quite fearful for her. And he knows that she's putting herself in danger's path once again, as she is wont to do. And he's talking to this third party, Baltise, and he says to her, he's sort of describing that he knows that she's putting herself in danger, but he says, I won't sift through her choices and take out the ones that make me afraid. They're not mine. And I kind of loved that. That's not exactly what he says. I wish I could quote it word for word.
I'm just like, chills again.
But I loved that. That sort of came out as I was writing, and I kind of thought that's sort of the essence of Ryan, is that my favorite part about him is that he's not trying to get in her way. He's not trying to stifle her in any manner because he's possessive or because he wants her to stay alive even. That's quite a common trope in books. And again, it's one of those things that I've read a million times, and I'll read it a million more times and I'll love it. I just thought, I'm not sure that I want Ryan to be, he's in my head, he's not this alpha male who's possessive and dominant and things. he feels quite possessive of her, but he's very in control of it, and he doesn't want that possessiveness to change her course or change her path. He's very aware that she has her own course in mind, and she's determined to walk it, and that he can decide whether he's going to walk beside her or not. So that's my favorite quote from the book. My favorite part of the book is a little bit more cheesy. I just really like the banter that Dawson and Ryan have together. And those scenes are always, they come out a million miles an hour. They are always like so fast paced for me when I'm writing, because I just enjoy writing them so much. And I really liked the cave scene where they find themselves in this cave, and Dawson's sort of she's lying there going, I'm going to die if I don't do something. And she doesn't really want to. She's not good at showing affection. She's not good at asking for help. And she has this moment where she kind of goes, you know what, stuff it. Like I'm not going to die here in a cave. So you are going to be my source of body heat. And that's, again, it's a common trope, but I just love it so much.
Well,
so my favorite.
But the difference in when you're talking about the quote and your favorite part of the story, they're tropes that we've seen before. The difference with the way you worked this trope, we didn't have to work to get to these parts.
Right.
These characters were unapologetically the same throughout. I love that they didn't start one way and end another. They knew who they were. They were who they were. They saw no need to change. They didn't need to change each other. They just went for it. And I love that. There was no character development in that regard. It was just, they were who they were. And that was
their core personality. Like, I really didn't want Dawson to become this soft cinnamon roll by the end of the book, because I just thought that's not realistic. If a human has survived 24 years in this frozen wasteland where the elements are dangerous, the people are dangerous, and you're living in this constant sense of fight or flight, survival mode all the time, that does things to your brain. That's quite traumatic. And she's got this incredibly hard shell. It doesn't take a man with wings to break that. So by the end of the book, she's not going to be this soft-scented marshmallow girl. That's not. It's just not ever who she's going to be. I like to think that we did see her soften reluctantly in certain regards. Like, for example, she did in the end, or like very slowly throughout and very reluctantly, she did begin to trust other people. She did begin to soften towards other people and be affectionate and use words more as well.
But again, that was a logical progression of where she came from and where she was going. So that made perfect sense.
Yeah, hopefully. And I had someone say to me the other day, and I hadn't thought of it myself. So maybe that was another one of those things that just sort of happened organically. I hate that buzzword, but organically through the story. They said to me, I noticed that Dawson used these like clipped short words in conversation at the beginning of the book. Most of, like, she had more of an inner monologue, and she didn't really use her words that much. And everything was clipped and short and abrupt.
Didn't have the opportunity.
Yeah. And then as she goes along, she sort of sort of swaps a little bit. She starts to speak her mind more and speak more flippantly, and she usually does it via yelling and screaming. But she doesn't sort of keep those things locked in anymore. And when that person said that to me, I thought, I hadn't really thought of it like that, but I like that you noticed it, because that, again, like, that speaks to the experiences that Dawson has throughout the book.
It was excellent. It was excellent. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. I'm so excited to have been able to read this book and review it. I cannot wait for book 2. Everyone, I will let you know when that one is coming out as soon as I get any information. But in the meantime, Ledge is available September 13th. You need to get your hands on a copy.
Thanks so much for having me, Leslie.
There you have it, friends. You have just heard from Stacey McEwan about why her story matters in regards to her debut novel, Ledge. If this one was not already on your radar, I hope it is now. I hope that between Stacey and I, for those of you who this isn't your normal subgenre, I hope that it encourages you to give it a try, because I absolutely loved it. I cannot wait for more from this world, more from these characters, and see what is going to happen next. Huge thank you to Angry Robot Robot Books for providing me with a copy of the ARC to read and review, as well as a huge thank you to Stacey McEwan for coming on the channel and sharing with us today. I hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one.